Hi, Kayan here, and I want to share the making of this piece of art with you. I started by collecting this assortment of papers. I have a lot of vintage papers. I was kind of trying to keep within a certain color range here of kind of vintage off-whites, muted cream colors, things like that. So I have old newspaper, old maps, some old typewritten sheet on some kind of transparent cream colored paper, and so those are going to be my kind of starting point colors for this piece. So I picked some acrylic inks that would correspond with those. I'm using a spray bottle to totally wet down my surface, which is a clayboard panel. So it's got this nice clay coating on it. That's what makes it work especially nice for this fluid medium approach here at the beginning. It really lets those colors just flow and spread and do beautiful things. And so I'm taking advantage of that. This same technique can be done on other, like watercolor paper or a regular stretch canvas panel, but those effects of the spreading of the ink will not be quite the same on those. So I dropped some ink onto a wet surface, and then I am adding more spray from just a water spray bottle to encourage that to spread. And you can see how lovely the designs it makes on that panel are. I think it's just beautiful. It's fun to play on these. You could also use alcohol inks or other inks, but I like the acrylic inks because I can work on top of those and not worry about it budging once it's dry. I'm carefully dabbing up a little bit of the excess, like the yellow was a little bolder than I wanted it to be, so I'm kind of dabbing up little bits of it. I'm kind of spreading a little bit of that ink around into some other areas, just to kind of give it a more all over, I guess, effect. Not worried about it having it everywhere, but I do want to spread it into some other areas and mute it down in the ones that are just a little too intense. So that's what I'm doing now. Treating the bottom area a little differently because I know that it's going to be, I have in mind what the scene I want to do. I know it's going to be a tree forest scene, and so I know that the bottom part is going to be a little bit more of a snowscape, or where the trees maybe aren't. So that's why I'm leaving that. I'm letting this drip, and I'm kind of just controlling where it drips and how far it drips by how I turn the panel different directions. And as you can see, you get some really beautiful marks doing that. So my surface is quite wet at this point, so I am using a dryer to dry it. I could leave it set for a while, and that would work too, but I am on a little bit of a time schedule as I work on this, so I'm needing to move along to the next step, and I do need it to be dry before I do that, because my next step will be taking that stack of paper that I had selected, my little curated stack, and selecting just a few pieces from that. So I had a stack of maybe, 10 or 12 possible papers to use, and I am not going to use all of those, but I gave myself a limited selection to choose from while I'm actually working, and that works well for me because I've done pre-selecting. I've narrowed it down already. I know that any of the papers in there are good possibilities, so that makes it quick and easy for me to make my selection as I work. So one of my favorite pieces, and one of the first I grabbed for, was this typewritten piece that's on, I don't know what was this called. It's a transparent paper, kind of an onion skin type thing, and I really like that because it is a way to put the type on there with letting that beautiful inky background show through. I'm using matte gel medium by Liquitex to stick these on. I've just transferred it into I get a big bucket of it and transfer it into a smaller jar, so that's what I'm using here. I also really like to use this silicone brush, which is by Master's Touch, and to spread my gel medium on, and I put it onto the surface where I'm gluing it and over as I stick it on, and it just makes it really nice and secured down. The next thing I'm pulling out is this bit of aviator's map, which I chose entirely by the colors here. I think it blends in very nicely. I decided to use it as some of the grounding area down here at the base of the trees, what will be trees, at the bottom of the canvas. I'm also wrapping around the sides. I really like to use these deep canvases and make the artwork wrap around the sides. That leaves the option to either frame or unframe, leave these unframed. So I like to always pay attention to the sides as I work as well. So my goal here is to have the paper cooperate with the ink that's already on there, the acrylic ink. So I'm not wanting to totally obscure that, but more like enhance it. So I am choosing where my papers go accordingly so that everything just cooperates and plays nice together. I love this old bits of newspaper on here. I think that they really add a fun look, and there's like a variety of type sizes that I end up using in my piece, which I also like. It is a little bit of a brittle paper, and I don't use, like, I'm a little bit sparing as I use the old newspaper, but also this acrylic medium really does a good job of protecting and preserving whatever papers you use in your art piece. So my goal here is to just create a really interesting surface. I kind of want every square inch of the background to have something of interest in it, whether it's a texture or pattern in the paint or the papers that I use or whatever. So now I am all done creating my background, and I'm using a colored pencil to sketch in my trees. I want this to be a forest. I know I'm going to paint negative spaces, so the trees will be actually this, what is now the background will become what the trees are. So I'm drawing in the outline of trees. I'm not drawing in the interior details, just the outer shapes. And so I will take a bit to do that. I'm kind of a little bit responding to what's already on there. I try to not be totally dictated, like, oh, I want to keep this part, but yet it does kind of imply some tree shapes here and there, and I kind of try to just go with that as well. So it's a little bit of an intuitive process to do it this way. You can also use, like, I've made my own tree stencil that I sometimes use, but this is really my preferred way because each little section of forest that I make on each piece of art is unique that way. I've finished drawing in all my trees, and now I'm pulling out some matte acrylic paint, and I am going to paint in all of those negative spaces left behind where a tree is not. So it's a little bit backwards thinking, but it's really just a matter at this point of painting in those shapes. You're thinking about the shapes between the trees instead of the shape of the tree. So you can see that as I add the paint, I'm keeping it just transparent enough that I can kind of see the interesting background behind it. I don't want to totally obscure it, at least not at this point. So I'm leaving it visible through there. So now I've finished up the first layer of negative spaces. I'm pretty happy with that. I'm mixing a color that I'm going to go back in and paint in more trees that will be more in the background. So the trees you see now will be the foreground of trees, the front trees, if you will. And I'm going to add some trees into the background to look like they are back behind them. This time I'm not going to paint negative space, but I'm going to actually paint silhouettes of trees in this color. And this color is just slightly different than what I previously painted. So it will be a little bit more of a subtle look within the background. It's like it's still in the background, but you're seeing more trees back there. I'm going for kind of a nighttime feel here, like a cold fall, late fall, winter night or dusk. And so I'm going with some dark colors here. So I'm painting some dark trees back there. Just kind of gives it a little bit of a sense of mystery and that nighttime feel. So you can see that since I was actually painting the tree, I didn't feel like I needed to draw these in ahead. I just kind of was filling in spaces in the background. Again, I'm remembering to include the sides in this as well because I want it to look like the scene wraps around the sides. The color I'm using now was some of that same blue that I used to paint the negative spaces between the trees, but I've added a little bit of sepia acrylic ink to it just to give it kind of that warm feeling. Even though I'm using a lot of blue, I still want there to be some warmth to the piece to kind of go with the vintage papers that I used and just the feel of it. So you can see in my original paint that I put down there was some of that yellow ink, and it's still coming through, and it gives kind of a sense of light shining on these trees. And I wanted that little bit of warmth to carry through into the background as well. So by adding that little bit of brown in there, I've kind of warmed up that blue and trees of the background. So now I'm adding another layer of trees, and these will be little shoots that are in the foreground. So they will be in front of those front trees that I did originally, and I'm just making these like they're kind of young sprouts. I'm making them a very light color, a light cream color, and so that they really look like they are in front of everything else. And now I'm ready to start kind of deepening some of those negative spaces. I've also added little dots onto those background trees just to make them look a little more interesting. And so I do love adding some doodles into my pieces as well, just for a little bit of texture and interest. And I am doing a little bit more detailed negative space painting now in response to the trees that I have added. been working really detailed with a little tiny paintbrush now because I added in a whole nother layer of trees in the back. So the original background negative space painting I did now has become another row of trees, and the new negative space is this really dark color. I know that all sounds very confusing, but it's just a matter of working a layer at a time, adding many layers of trees. So now I'm up to 1, 2, 3, 4 layers of trees in this piece, which just gives it a lot of depth. So here's my finished piece. Thanks for watching.